County 911.
Ma'am, I killed my boyfriend in self-defense.
What did you kill him with?
A loaded gun in the house.
Tell me where the gun is right now.
The gun is in the house. I laid it on the bookshelf.
Where are you?
I'm standing about 10 feet from his dead body.
It is a Friday evening, October 12th, 2012, in Lexington, Kentucky. A young woman is getting ready to go out. 80 miles away, in a condominium in the small Cincinnati suburb of Highland Heights, a 29-year-old lawyer named Ryan Poston is doing the same, getting dressed, checking his phone, preparing for what was supposed to be a first date with a woman he'd been talking to for months. Two people. Two ordinary Friday evenings. Neither one of them aware of how the next few hours would end. This is not simply the story of a relationship that turned violent. What happened inside that Highland Heights condo was the final act of an obsession that had been building for 18 months, an obsession that friends had warned Ryan about, that Ryan himself had privately admitted frightened him, and that he had spent the better part of a year trying to escape. He never made it to that date. Shayna Hubers made sure of that.
He had his hand on the table, and he wasn't completely standing up. He was like this. He was sitting, he was enough that when I shot him, he went like this. Literally. That's when I knew he was dead. Or close to it, and twitching.
In the hours after the shooting, a police camera was rolling. What it captured was not grief. It was not shock. It was something closer to relief, and a jury of 12 people would later agree. It will be the moment in this story you come back to. Stay until the end. There is one detail about this case that almost no one talks about, something that happened years after the crime, inside a prison, and it changes how you see Shayna Hubers entirely. He had told friends he was nervous about the date. He'd picked the restaurant, changed it, picked it again. By the time Audrey Bolte finally stopped waiting and went home that night, Ryan was already dead on the floor of his own living room. Was this the act of a woman in genuine fear for her life? Or was it the inevitable conclusion of something that was always going to end this way? Ryan Carter Poston was born on December 30th, 1982, in Fort Mitchell, Kentucky, a small, tight-knit community just south of Cincinnati where families knew each other and reputations were built over generations. He was the eldest of 4 children, with 3 younger sisters who adored him. His grandfather, James Poston Sr., had practiced law for 54 years in the same region. The law was not something Ryan stumbled into. It was inherited, absorbed through the walls of a family that understood what it meant to stand in a courtroom and fight for someone who could not fight for themselves. He triple majored at Indiana University, graduating in 2005, then earned his law degree at Northern Kentucky University in Highland Heights, the same small suburb where he would eventually make his home, where he would eventually die. He passed the bar and began building a practice in Cincinnati with what colleagues described as a genuine passion for legal aid. Friends remembered him as the kind of person who made a room feel easier. Brilliant, funny, exceptionally good-looking, in a way he seemed almost unaware of. The kind of guy, as more than one person put it, that you simply wanted around. By 2011, Ryan Poston had built the kind of life that looked, from the outside, exactly like it was supposed to. Then he sent a Facebook friend request to a 20-year-old psychology student from Lexington named Shayna Hubers, and the architecture of that life began, quietly and without announcement, to crack. Shayna Michelle Hubers was born on April 8, 1990. She completed her psychology degree at the University of Kentucky in 3 years, graduating cum laude, and was pursuing a master's degree in school counseling. From the outside, she looked like someone on her way somewhere. The meeting was unremarkable in the way that so many catastrophic things begin. Ryan came across a spring break photo of Shayna on Facebook in March 2011 and sent a request. She accepted. She messaged him, "You are gorgeous, by the way." They met in person for the first time on April 8th, her birthday. They began dating shortly after. To people who did not know them, they looked exactly like what you would expect. Happy, ambitious, going somewhere. But Ryan's friends noticed something almost immediately. The text started early. Not a message here and there. Dozens a day, sometimes climbing toward 100. Ryan started leaving his phone face down. Shayna began showing up at his condo unannounced, 80 miles from Lexington, a drive she made without warning and without invitation. She asked people around Ryan whether she was prettier than his ex-girlfriend, Lauren Worley. She asked more than once. She needed the answer in a way that made people uncomfortable. Privately, in messages to close friends, Ryan was beginning to say things he would not say out loud. That Shayna was probably the craziest person he had ever met. That she almost scared him. He did not end it, not yet. The relationship continued through 2011 and into 2012, on again, off again, cycling back each time Ryan tried to create distance. By the autumn of 2012, he had made a decision. He was ending it permanently. He had begun talking to other people, making plans, moving forward. On October 12th, he had a date. Audrey Bolte was Miss Ohio USA 2012 when she and Ryan Poston made plans to meet on the evening of October 12, 2012. The plan was simple. A local spot, some drinks, a game of pool, a low-key Friday night. Ryan had been looking forward to it. He was nervous in the way people are nervous about things that matter. He never arrived. Audrey waited. She checked her phone. Eventually, she went home.
He was very funny and very smart, and I found him very entertaining, and that led me to accept an invite to go on a date with him.
She told prosecutors later that she never even knew Shayna Hubers existed, not until after October 12th. She found out the way the rest of the world did. What Audrey did not know, what no one outside that Highland Heights condominium knew, was that Shayna Hubers had arrived first. What happened inside Ryan Poston's condo that evening has never been fully reconstructed to everyone's satisfaction. What is not disputed is the outcome. Shayna Hubers showed up at the door. Ryan Poston let her in. What followed was an argument. And at some point during that argument, Shayna Hubers reached for a gun. It was Ryan's own registered handgun, a Sig Sauer P238 .380 caliber semi-automatic, kept inside the condo. At some point, before she fired, she released the safety. Police Chief Bill Birkenhauer would later testify that he considered that single act evidence of premeditation. You do not release the safety by accident. She fired 6 times. Forensic pathologist Dr. Gregory Wagner, who performed the autopsy, testified to something that stopped the courtroom. The first shot was to Ryan's head. There was no blood on the front of his shirt, which, as forensic expert Howard Ryan explained, that when that first bullet struck him, Ryan Poston's head went straight down onto the dining room table. He was sitting. He never stood up again. The remaining shots were fired downward, from fewer than 2 feet away. All 6 bullets were recovered from his body. There were no exit wounds. Ryan's downstairs neighbors, Vernon and Doris West, heard the shooting from below. 2 shots first, then 4 more. They heard no sounds of a fight before them. Ryan's blood was found on the gun itself, meaning at least 1 shot had been fired from so close to his body that blood had traveled back onto the weapon. Birkenhauer drew one conclusion. She had moved closer for the final shots. Ryan Poston's body came to rest on the floor, between a table and a radiator. His blood covered the living room wall. It pooled on the floor beneath him. He was 29 years old. Shayna Hubers did not call 911 immediately. Investigators would later estimate that between 10 and 15 minutes passed between the final shot and the moment she picked up the phone. What she did during those minutes, whether she considered leaving, whether she stood over him while the silence settled, none of that has ever been established. What is established is what she said when she finally dialed. She told the dispatcher, "I killed my boyfriend in self-defense." Not a confession fractured by panic, not a voice coming apart at the edges. The words arrived in order, deliberate, the story already assembled. She had between 10 and 15 minutes to decide on that story. She delivered it as though she had been rehearsing it far longer. When police arrived, Sergeant David Fornash, the first officer on scene, looked around the room and noticed something. Items on the dining room table were undisturbed. Nothing was knocked over. Nothing was out of place. Hubers had told dispatchers that Ryan had thrown her around the apartment before she grabbed the gun. Fornash would later testify, if it went how Miss Hubers said, it would be knocked over. It was not. Why the last shot? In cases of genuine self-defense, investigators look for shots fired in panic, in retreat, in desperation. What they found here was a man sitting at his own dining room table, shot in the head first, fired upon from closer and closer range as he fell. 5 shots might be fear. 6 shots, fired downward from 2 feet away, with blood transferring back onto the weapon, suggested something else entirely. Shayna Hubers had an answer for that too. She would give it in exhaustive and at times extraordinary detail to anyone who would listen. The problem was, she could not stop talking. Sergeant Fornash transported Shayna Hubers to the station that night. She had asked for an attorney. Police told her they would ask no questions until one arrived. That was the agreement. She could not keep it for more than a few minutes. Unprompted, without a single question directed at her, she began to talk. And she talked for approximately 3 hours. What came out of that room, captured on police video in its entirety, was not a grieving woman processing shock. It was a performance that kept changing its own script. The footage begins with Hubers seated in the interrogation room, waiting. A detective steps out. The moment the door closes, the crying stops. She looks. When the detective returns, the tears resume. Police Chief Birkenhauer watched it in real time from another room and described it to CBS News with 2 words, like a light switch. Prosecutor Michelle Snodgrass would later say the same thing differently. She said, "The minute he walks out of the room, the crying stops." That is the actress. But the crying was not the moment that defined the tape. At some point during those hours, Hubers began to talk about Ryan's appearance, about his vanity, about a conversation they had shared, one of their last good ones, she said, in which Ryan had mentioned wanting a nose job. She told police what she had done with that information. She said, "I shot him right there. I gave him his nose job he wanted. I broke it." Birkenhauer described his reaction. "My jaw hit the floor. I said to myself, did she really say that? She had. And she was not finished." At some point while waiting alone in that room, Shayna Hubers got up and began dancing. She twirled. She snapped her fingers and sang, "Amazing Grace" first. Then, moving around the room, "I did it, yes, I did it." Investigators described her as not distressed, not dissociated, but lit up, somehow present. And then she said something else, unprompted to no one. She said, "I am so good at acting." The prosecution had their tape. Now they needed to build the case around it. What investigators found when they went deeper into the relationship told a story that had been visible for months to everyone around Ryan Poston. Visible and ignored until it was too late. Tens of thousands of messages, most of them unanswered. The unannounced drives of 80 miles. The hacking of Ryan's Facebook account to block women he was connected to. Anonymous messages attacking his professional reputation, his body, his competence, sent in secret to the people around him while she maintained, in public, that she loved him. Birkenhauer testified to all of it. He had gone through their records line by line. Ryan Poston never knew any of this was coming from her. 11 days before the shooting, Hubers sent a friend a photograph of herself and Ryan at a gun range along with a message. It said, "A part of me wanted to turn around and shoot him." Sent, reportedly, with casualness. The kind of statement that registers as a joke until it does not. And this is the part of the case people still argue about today, because there were witnesses who did not describe a saint. Some testified Ryan could be dismissive, even cruel, in front of others. Defense attorney David Eldridge said it plainly. He wanted her for sex. He would push her away and then bring her back. And then he would tell his friends she was crazy. In one courtroom narrative, Shayna Hubers arrived that night to punish Ryan for a date he had made with someone else and executed him at his own table. In the other, she was a woman who had spent 18 months being psychologically dismantled and finally broke. Ryan Poston's 3 younger sisters sat in that courtroom for every day of testimony. They did not find the second narrative convincing. The jury agreed. The first thing Shayna Hubers did after Ryan Poston stopped moving was not call for help. She searched for her phone. It took her a while to find it, and when she found it, the first call she made was not to 911. It was to her mother. She told her mother what had happened. Then she dialed emergency services and said, "I killed my boyfriend in self-defense." She thought she had a story. She thought that story would hold. She thought, by her own testimony at the retrial, that she would explain it to police and go home. She told the witness stand in 2018,
Ryan standing over me and grabbing the gun that was sitting on the table and pointing it at me and saying, "I could just kill you right now and get away with it. Nobody would even know." He set the gun back down on the table and he walked around the table and he screamed at me, "You're a up person."
I believed in my innocence, and I wanted to see my mother and go home. She did not go home. The prosecution's answer to why 6 shots and why the face was built entirely from the physical record. Ryan Poston had been shot in the head first. He never stood up. The final shot, the one to his face, was fired from within 2 feet. His own blood transferred back onto the gun. Prosecutor Snodgrass put it to the jury without equivocation. This was not a woman firing blindly in panic. This was a woman who kept pulling the trigger after the threat. If there had ever been one, was gone. The last shot was not survival. It was something personal, something that could not be explained by fear, because fear would have stopped. The jury deliberated for 5 hours and came back with one word: guilty. But the path to a final reckoning ran through a moment of legal chaos that came closer than anyone had anticipated to setting Shayna Hubers free entirely. One of the lawyers working on Hubers' appeal was reviewing the jury list from the 2015 trial when she recognized a name she had not expected to see there. She had represented this man herself more than 20 years earlier in a child support proceeding. He had pleaded guilty. That guilty plea made him a convicted felon, Kentucky law bars convicted felons from jury service, and he had served on the jury that convicted Shayna Hubers of murder. On August 25, 2016, more than 3 years after the crime, Judge Fred Stein, the same judge who had called the killing cold-blooded and sentenced Hubers to 40 years, was compelled by law to overturn the conviction and order a new trial. Whether the juror genuinely did not remember his guilty plea or not, the law made no distinction for intention. The conviction was gone. Ryan Poston's family received that news and had nowhere to put it. The retrial opened in August 2018, nearly 6 years after Ryan's death. 16 days of testimony. Hubers took the stand. She described the night in terms that the police video directly contradicted. Two versions of the same story, neither consistent with a man shot in the head first, from above, at a dining room table, with nothing knocked over and nothing out of place. The jury deliberated for 5 hours. On August 28, 2018, more than 2,000 days after Ryan Poston died on the floor of his Highland Heights condominium, Shayna Michelle Hubers was found guilty of murder for the second time. The jury recommended the maximum sentence. Life in the gallery, Ryan Poston's sisters held each other. They had been here before. This time it would hold. The Kentucky Supreme Court affirmed the conviction in 2020. There was nothing left to appeal. Shayna Hubers was, by every outward measure, someone who should have known better, not just instinctively. Academically, she had a psychology degree, graduated cum laude, and was training specifically to recognize psychological distress in young people and intervene before it became catastrophic. She knew what her own behavior looked like in a textbook. She did it anyway. In 2008, she had been accepted to Kentucky's prestigious Governor's School for the Arts on a full vocal music performance scholarship. She was an all-state musician. A childhood friend, Sarah Robinson, told CBS News that she considered Shayna close to genius. The person Robinson saw in the mugshot after the arrest, angry, hollowed out, unrecognizable, was not the person she had grown up with. Robinson said, "It looked like someone who was angry, like someone who had just been through hell." The behaviors prosecutors documented did not begin on October 12, 2012. They had been building visibly for the entire 18 months of the relationship. Tens of thousands of messages, the unannounced drives, the hacked Facebook account, the anonymous attacks sent in secret, and then the gun range message 11 days before his death. A part of me wanted to turn around and shoot him. What forensic psychologists describe in cases like this is a specific and recognizable pattern. An individual for whom love, or the fear of losing it, becomes the only thing that holds the self together. When that attachment is threatened, not just hurt, but threatened at the level of identity, the response is not proportionate grief. It is something closer to annihilation. Both prosecution and defense experts agreed on the diagnosis borderline personality disorder, but the clinical label does not fully explain what happened on that police video. Ryan Poston did not break Shayna Hubers' heart on October 12, 2012. In the architecture she had built around that relationship, he was doing something worse. He was ceasing to need her. He was replacing her. And he was doing it with a woman who had been crowned Miss Ohio. A comparison Shayna Hubers could not win and could not survive. She had a psychology degree. She could have named every mechanism at work in herself that night. This is the part experts still argue about today. Was what happened in that condominium the final act of a premeditated plan? A woman who had already, in writing, contemplated shooting Ryan Poston, who arrived that night knowing how it would end? Or was it the implosion of a person who arrived genuinely believing the relationship could still be saved, and snapped in a single irreversible moment when she understood it could not? 2 juries called it murder. But the question of whether Shayna Hubers walked into that condo already decided, or whether the decision was made in the seconds between the argument and the gun, has never been answered with the certainty the facts seem to demand. And here is the detail almost no one talks about. In the summer of 2018, during the weeks of her retrial, Shayna Hubers got married. Inside the Campbell County Jail, she wed a convicted drug trafficker named Richard McBee, who sometimes identifies as a transgender woman named Unique Taylor. The woman who killed a man rather than accept the end of a relationship had, from inside a prison cell, found another one, and ended it herself on her own terms approximately a year later. The woman who could not be left on the police video hours after the shooting. She had worried aloud about exactly this. She had said, "I do not know if anyone will want to marry me if they heard I killed my boyfriend in self-defense." Then she got up, and she danced, and she announced to an empty room that she was very good at acting. She was 21 years old. She had just killed a man. And in the silence of that room, the performance she was most proud of was not the grief. It was the fact that anyone had believed it at all. Ryan Carter Poston was buried in St. John's Cemetery in Fort Mitchell, Kentucky, the same community where he was born, where his grandfather had practiced law for 54 years, where 3 younger sisters had grown up watching their eldest brother become the person they were proud of. At the sentencing hearing, Ryan's father, Jay Poston, addressed Shayna Hubers' mother directly. He said, "How dare you equate your loss to mine? I sat here for 6 long years." He told the court his grandchildren had been stolen from him, that he would never hold them. He said, "She has decimated my life and many other lives." Ryan's family released a statement. It said, "Those who love Ryan now move forward with the integrity, dignity, and kindness that Ryan exemplified throughout his life. Today, we embrace justice, and yet we do not feel joy. It has been 6 long and heartbreaking years without our beloved Ryan. There was no joy. There was only the absence of further uncertainty. And even that had taken 2 trials, 1 overturned conviction, and more than 2,000 days to arrive. Shayna Michelle Hubers remains incarcerated at the Kentucky Correctional Institution for Women in Pewee Valley, Kentucky, parole eligible in 2032. She maintains a prison pen pal profile in which she describes herself as a musician and a Dean's List scholar. She does not mention Ryan Poston. In his memory, his family established a scholarship at Blessed Sacrament School in Fort Mitchell, awarded each year to a 6th grader who demonstrates compassion and caring for others. The qualities, his family said, that Ryan exemplified throughout his life. A lawyer's grandson, a triple major, a man who was nervous about a first date and picked the restaurant twice and changed his mind. Gone at 29. The case is officially closed. The convictions have been affirmed. The sentence is life. But one question has followed this story from the beginning, and it has never been answered. Ryan Poston had been trying to end this relationship for months. He had told his friends, he had told his father, He had the private texts, the fear, the awareness that something about Shayna Hubers frightened him in a way he could not fully articulate. And he kept letting her in. At what point does someone become responsible for ignoring the warnings they gave themselves? Ryan Poston never answered that question. Now he never can. If this story moved you, give it a like, share it to raise awareness, comment your thoughts, and subscribe to follow more real-life true crime cases.